The German tanks that rolled through France with Hitler's Blitzkrieg were not actually German. In September 1939, German panzer divisions carved through Poland in 26 days. It took them 6 weeks to break France. The world watched armored columns swallow entire nations and assumed it was witnessing the triumph of German engineering. The tanks that spearheaded those victories were fast, reliable, and lethal. They crossed rivers, flanked fortified positions, and shredded everything the Allies threw in their path. Experts claimed it was the industrial genius of the Reich that had rebuilt its war machine from nothing in half a decade. They were wrong. In March 1939, Adolf Hitler dissolved the Republic of Czechoslovakia without firing a single shot. The territory folded into the Third Reich overnight, and with it came a prize the Wehrmacht had not fully anticipated: 469 armored fighting vehicles sitting in depots and factory yards within the Škoda works and the CKD factories, two of the finest arms manufacturing complexes in all of Europe. Not even the Nazi regime could have guessed it at the moment, but this forced acquisition would change the fate of the war that was about to begin. Among those 469 vehicles, 298 were LTVZ-35s and 80 LTVZ-38s. These were light tanks, Czech-designed, Czech-built, and now German-owned. The LTVZ-35, the Leaky Tank Visor 1935, was an 11.6-ton machine manufactured jointly by Škoda and CKD. Its most distinctive feature was a pneumatically assisted steering and suspension system that made the tank remarkably easy to drive over broken ground. Frontal armor measured 25 millimeters. Side armor ran 16 millimeters. The turret housed a Škoda A3 37mm cannon and one of the tank's two 7.92mm machine guns, the second mounted in the hull. By 1939 standards, that armament was cutting edge, yet it was a combination of optics, relatively reliable mechanics, and great firepower that made them truly remarkable. A 4-man crew operated the vehicle, powered by a 6-cylinder Škoda T11 engine producing 120 horsepower. The Model 35 could reach 24 miles per hour on roads and cover 120 miles before needing to refuel. It was a great tank, a wish come true for Germany, except for one critical flaw. The pneumatic steering system froze in winter conditions. Its lines hardened, the valves seized. The tank became nearly impossible to steer once temperatures dropped below freezing. CKD engineers set out to solve the problem. Their answer was the LTVZ-38. They stripped the pneumatic apparatus entirely, replacing it with a conventional mechanical steering mechanism and a simplified leaf spring suspension. The trade-off in ride comfort was negligible. The gain in reliability was enormous. The new suspension allowed the Model 38 to negotiate terrain that the 35 could never handle. Armor protection remained comparable to its predecessor, but the cannon received a significant upgrade: the more powerful Škoda A7 37mm gun, a 125 horsepower Praga EPA 6-cylinder engine pushed the tank to 25 miles per hour and extended its cross-country range to 84 miles. The result was the finest light tank of its era. During the summer of 1939, the Wehrmacht integrated these stolen machines into its light panzer divisions. The LTVZ-35 became the Panzerkampfwagen 35T. The LTVZ-38 became the PZKW-38T. The lowercase t stood for Czechoslovakia. German crews, quickly impressed by the tank's durability and mechanical reliability, gave the 38T a nickname that stuck: Robuste Fahrzeuge, robust vehicle. On September 1st, 1939, the Wehrmacht launched Case White, the invasion of Poland. More than 200 PZKW-35Ts rolled east alongside their German-built counterparts. They accounted for 10.5% of the armoured force committed to the operation. The 1st Light Panzer Division carried 112 of them. Of the division's 221 tanks, the 35Ts were the most capable machines in its inventory. The remainder were the far less effective PZKW-1s and 2s. During the 3rd week of September, the division helped trap more than 60,000 Polish soldiers near the Bug River. The 3rd Light Panzer Division, spearheaded by its battalion of 59 PZKW-38Ts, destroyed the Polish Krakow Cavalry Brigade near Woźniki on the very first day of the war. Days later, the division participated in the encirclement and surrender of the Polish 7th Infantry Division at Częstochowa. The durability figures that emerged from Poland stunned German logistics officers. Of the 218 tanks the Wehrmacht lost in the entire campaign, only 7 were Czech. Mechanical breakdowns sidelined another 70 temporarily, but the 2.75% loss rate was extraordinary. Demands poured in from field commanders. Send more Czech tanks to the Panzerwaffe immediately. The 38T earned its next distinction in a theatre where conventional military wisdom insisted tanks could never fight. Norway. Seaborne transportation constraints limited the German commitment to a single battalion of 100 tanks, 15 of which were PZKW-38Ts. The mountainous terrain, narrow valleys, and frozen roads should have rendered armour irrelevant. The Czech tanks disagreed. At the Battle of Tretton on April 23, 1940, British and Norwegian infantry held a bridge over the Lagan River. This was the only crossing point that could sustain the German advance on Dombås and Trondheim. Allied troops controlled the bridge and the hills overlooking it and had repulsed repeated German infantry assaults. Then the 38Ts of the 40th Panzer Battalion arrived. Moving over terrain that should have been impassable, the tanks flanked the defenders and forced a British retreat that evening. 5 days later, near Dombås, dug-in Allied forces again halted German infantry attacks. Once more, the 38Ts swung around the flanks. The British fell back. By May 1st, the Royal Navy was evacuating troops from central Norway. French and British troops would find these tanks equally dreadful during the Battle of France. The newly formed 7th and 8th Panzer Divisions carried PZKW-38Ts into France. The 6th Panzer Division brought its 35Ts. Together, 228 PZKW-38Ts and the available 35Ts constituted 13% of the Panzerwaffe's entire tank strength for the invasion. Major General Erwin Rommel commanded the 7th Panzer Division. His unit would become famous as the Phantom Division for its terrifying speed. On May 12th, Rommel's Czech tanks reached the Meuse River and destroyed a force of French H-35 and AMR-35 tanks with ease. 2 days later, his division burst out of its Meuse bridgehead and drove west. The next day, the 7th Panzer Division collided with the French 1st Division Cuirassiers at the Battle of Flavion. The engagement revealed the Czech tanks' lethal ingenuity against superior armor. Rommel's nimble 38Ts circled the heavier and better armed French Char B-1 tanks at close range, pumping rounds into their ventilator systems and tracks. The French heavy tanks, individually superior in armor and firepower, were picked apart. By May 16th, France's only mobile armored reserve north of Sedan had ceased to exist. The stolen Czech machines had helped crack open Western Europe. On the Eastern Front, The contribution of Czech armor to Operation Barbarossa was staggering. On June 22, 1941, the Wehrmacht invaded the Soviet Union. A total of 149 PZ-KW-35Ts and 623 PZ-KW-38Ts crossed the Soviet border. Czech tanks accounted for 23.2% of Germany's armored invasion force. Against Soviet BT series light tanks and T-26, the Czech 37mm guns performed well. Then the T-34s appeared, and behind them the KV-1s. The Škoda cannon that had shredded French and Polish armor bounced harmlessly off the T-34's sloped plates. Crews watched their rounds spark and ricochet at ranges where they had destroyed everything the year before. The 37mm earned a grim new name among German tankers, the door knocker. It announced your presence. It did nothing else. Tactical skill kept German crews alive. The panzer divisions used superior coordination, flanking maneuvers, and combined arms tactics to turn off Soviet heavy armor when possible. But no amount of training could overcome the fundamental disparity in firepower and protection. Czech tanks that had performed brilliantly in France found themselves used as decoys on the Eastern Front, drawing Soviet fire so that better-armed German vehicles could close for the kill. The 6th Panzer Division drove its 160 PZ-KW-35Ts toward Leningrad. By September 10th, only 102 remained operational despite 2 replacement shipments from Germany. By the end of October, 34 were combat fit. A report dated November 30th, 1941, recorded the final count: 0 PZ-KW-35Ts available for action. The Russian winter had revived the Model 35's original sin. Pneumatic lines froze solid. Production of the 35T halted permanently. Spare parts manufacturing ceased. The surviving 26 operational tanks were sold to Romania. Those 2 damaged to return to service had their turrets and hull guns stripped and their chassis converted into ammunition carriers and artillery tractors. The 38T lasted longer, but its days as a frontline tank ended in 1941. By early 1942, the surviving machines had been entirely withdrawn from panzer divisions. They served as reconnaissance vehicles, guarded railway lines, and conducted anti-partisan sweeps in occupied territory. Hundreds more were handed off to Axis allies. Romania, Bulgaria, Slovakia, and Hungary continued fielding Czech tanks in combat roles on the Eastern Front through the final days of the war. The Wehrmacht refused to waste the 38T chassis. The drivetrain was too reliable, the hull too adaptable. If the turret and its obsolete gun could no longer fight modern tanks, the platform beneath them still could. Beginning in 1942, German engineers mounted powerful anti-tank guns onto modified 38T hulls. The Marder III carried either a German 75mm PaK-40 or a captured Soviet 76.2mm gun in an open-topped fighting compartment. Approximately 1,217 were built during the war. They were ugly, exposed, and effective. The most lethal offspring of the Czech chassis arrived later. The Jagdpanzer 38T, known to history as the Hetzer, featured heavily sloped armor, a devastatingly low profile, and a 75mm cannon. American troops who learned to fear the small tank destroyer's ability to lie motionless in concealment and fire at point-blank range called it the Bushwhacker. Flamethrower and recovery variants followed. Altogether, Czech factories built nearly 3,700 self-propelled guns and 102 ammunition carriers on the PZKW-38T chassis. Over 1,414 complete 38T tanks had been produced for Germany and its allies before the design was retired from turret tank service. The seizure of 469 Czech armored vehicles in March 1939 provided the Wehrmacht with crucial mechanical reliability. It needed to execute the early Blitzkrieg victories that swallowed up Poland, Norway, and France. When the tanks themselves became obsolete, their chassis provided the defensive machines that helped a doomed Reich bleed its enemies for 3 more years of war. Every Hetzer that burned an American Sherman in the hedgerows of 1944 traced its lineage back to a Czech factory floor that Hitler had taken without a fight.